It is NBA Finals week. Finally, we
Finally.
are near the end of this season, and we have an incredible finals matchup um, with the Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavs. Before we jump into this, Chaz, I want to quickly get your thoughts and perspectives over, just this season as a whole.
Yeah, I thought it's been a great season. I feel like a lot of the time we talked about, kind of on a collision course between the Celtics and or I'm sorry, the Celtics and the Nuggets. And then obviously we get here and the Mavericks are the team that we find in the finals. They've been one of the best teams in the league since the trade deadline. And I kind of want to talk about that later, that deadline and a couple of those moves really reshaped this entire season. I mean, since that deadline, these have been the two best teams. So even though a lot of us
Yeah.
thought the Nuggets were going to get there, obviously the Celtics were the favorite in the East. I think this might be the matchup that we had to get out the whole time. And I think it's going to be a great series.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most exciting and most unpredictable matchups that we've probably seen in the last, I want to say decade, maybe.
Yeah.
We think about those Golden State and Cavaliers and finals, and foregone conclusion almost that a team loaded up like the Warriors were, that they were going to win, and Toronto and Golden State. I would say that the one that was probably the most shocking was 2022 when Boston lost to Golden State, because you look at Golden State and you say, you know what, this team, Boston is far and away better statistically, and as far as the overall better team. But we know what happened in that series. And then obviously we go back to the 3-1 comeback when LeBron James came back and won against the Golden State Warriors when they were down 3-1. So just some compelling matchups that we've seen over the last decade. Um, and so I put this as far as up there when it comes to one of the most unpredictable matchups that, and exciting matchups that we're going to see. We're going to see Luka and Kyrie battle Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. We seeing four superstars on the biggest stage that the NBA has to offer. When is the last time we've seen that? We saw Steph and LeBron. We saw Steph, KD, and LeBron. But when is the last time we've seen two superstars from each team do battle? And so that's going to be compelling. I think it's going to be really interesting. I can't wait to get started, and I can't wait to see game one. Anything else to add to that?
No, you're exactly right. It's a star-studded finals, and I'm right there with you. Even though the Celtics seem to be the heavy favorites, I'm not with that. I think it could go either way.
I think it go either way, and we're going to get into picks later. The last segment of the show. So if you guys want to see our picks, go ahead and stay tuned for that. So let's hop right into our topics and our segments for today. We're going to start with the Celtics. We're going to start to the keys to the Celtics getting a finals win. What are your keys to a Celtics victory in this NBA Finals?
Yeah, so for both teams, just kind of going back and looking through, I wrote down five things. I'll start off with a couple and then go to you. Maybe we can bounce back and forth. But
Okay.
I think something we really saw in that conference finals with the Mavericks is if Luka and Kyrie are combining for 60 points, they're almost impossible to beat. So that's my first key for the Celtics is you absolutely have to keep those guys right around 55 points at the max. If they get 60, 65 plus, like we saw a couple of times in that Timberwolves series, it's really hard to slow them down, especially because they're nearly impossible to stop in that fourth quarter. Another one that I wrote down was that going off of that is that the Celtics need to have the lead going into the fourth quarter. Like I said, this Mavericks team operate better than just about anybody else down the stretch because you can either give the ball to Kyrie and spread it out, let him go ISO, or you can get Luka in a high pick and roll and he's going to tear you apart in that. And I feel like we've seen over the last few weeks that this team, probably along with the Nuggets, are the two best teams operating in the clutch. And when you have a guy like Luka and Kyrie, it's hard to get wins unless you have the lead going to the fourth quarter. So a team like Boston, who we've seen kind of struggle at times trying to close out games, I feel like they have to have that lead going into the fourth quarter with about 6 minutes left. They need to be up by a couple possessions so that they have some room for error. Another one that I'll
For
mention,
every game?
not every game, but if they can have the lead with 6 minutes left in in 4 games, I think they got a good chance to win the series. I don't think
Okay.
anybody think that this is going to be a quick series. I think it's going to go 6 or 7 either way. So if Boston can consistently have a lead late, then I think they're going to have a pretty good chance to win it. I'll mention one more, and then I'll get back to the others later. But I think another key one is Jason Tatum finding more success from 3-point range. I mean, this is a guy that's a 37, 38% 3-point shooter throughout the season. In the playoffs, he's been down to under 30%. I mean, he was at about 25% for most of the playoffs. I think now it climbed up to about 29. I don't think that's going to cut it against the Mavericks. We need Jason Tatum to be hitting, 3 threes at least per game on a high level efficiency. And that's something that we haven't seen for him in the playoffs in a couple years. So I think that's another key. Those three things, along with a couple others, I think are going to be significant keys for the Celtics.
So I like how you mentioned, I think your first key is that 60 points for Luke and Kyrie to be able to match that. And I don't think you said those exact same words, but the front court, back court, however you want to categorize it, technically, Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown are front court. But we're going to say just the matchup of the duos, I guess. I guess I'm going to say that is that the front court has to dominate. They have to be able to match backcourt of Kyrie and Luca in order for them to be successful in this series. If Luca and Kyrie are putting up 60, 70 points, Tatum and Brown have to be on par with that in order for them to be successful and eventually win this series. Number two, again, you mentioned Jason Tatum impact. Jason Tatum with the 3-point shot. I want to say Jason Tatum impact. How is Jason Tatum going to play in this finals? He is the single most important player in this finals, and it's not close. And so how will he play in down the stretch where the last couple of years that has been the main problem and the main knock we've had against Jay Tatum is he hasn't showed up in the clutch. He hasn't showed up when it mattered the most. So his impact on the game has to be felt late. Now, that's not saying that he needs to be the best player in this series. Brown, in 2022, Jalen Brown was the best player on the Boston Celtics. In order for the Celtics to win this series, Jason Tatum doesn't need to be the best player. He just can't duplicate what he did against Golden State. So I think for me is that his impact on how the game is perceived throughout the quarters is going to be really important. And I'm glad you brought up having a lead in the fourth quarter because that's a psyche thing. You have the lead in the fourth quarter, going with 6 minutes left in the game. You're up by 6, you're up by 8. And then you have the ability and you have the willpower to say, you know what, we can close this team out. With a team like Kyrie and Luca, who are one of the greatest scoring duos we've ever seen, it's going to be hard for them to maintain that lead if Jason Tatum is not efficient, if he's not effective, if he's not aggressive. And so I think he is the main component in the series. And lastly, because we have a lot to get to, so we're going to get back to this. I'm going to say Brown or Tatum on Luca. Who's going to take the matchup of Luca? That's going to be very important in this series because Luca he tends to methodically slow you down. You can't speed him up. You can't slow him down. He's like Jokic in that sense, where you can't change your speed, direction, or anything. And so, is he going to tire Brown now? He's going to tire Tatum out. Are they going to have legs? They have enough legs on the offensive end and be able to continue to put up those 20, 25 shots they're going to have to take? Or is Luka going to essentially dominate from a 3-point perspective and inside of the field perspective? And that's going to be important in this series. So I'm looking forward to whoever's guarding Luka between Brown and Tatum. And maybe it's not either, but I'm going to assume that one of them is going to take that assignment.
Yeah, I mean, when we've seen these teams play during the regular season and going back the past few years, it mostly has been Jalen Brown on Luca. And Luca, I think this season, I believe he scored 37 in one game and 38 in the other. So even a great defender like Jalen Brown wasn't able to do much with him. And we'll get to that more in matchups to watch for. But I actually thought in those two games that Holiday guarding Kyrie was really effective because even though Luca got off, Kyrie wasn't nearly as effective as we've seen him be. And I think Holiday on him is going to be a key matchup to watch. So we'll probably break both those down in a minute here.
Yeah, absolutely. That was another one of my points as Drew on Kyrie. Being able to slow Kyrie down. You're not going to stop Kyrie, but being able to slow him down as effectively and efficiently as he possibly can in order for them to have a good series. Because Kyrie, we're going to get into it a little later. One of my points was he cannot start off slow the way he started off against the Timberwolves. Having these slow first halves where he's not really shooting effectively, he's not shooting efficiently, and he's not scoring a lot of points. That simply cannot happen in this series is if the Mavs were going to win.